Hello builders, welcome to another video here on Majestic.cloud. My name is Laszlo and today I'm going to show you how to integrate API gateway with SQS. This is also known as a queue-based load leveling pattern. Before we do that, please make sure to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss any new awesome videos that might come out. So let's see why would we need to integrate API gateway and SQS. In some cases, you might want to process the requests that are coming into API gateway in an asynchronous way. That could be happening for many reasons, but usually you might want to do this if you want to avoid overwhelming some downstream integration. Let's imagine you have an e-commerce website that receives a large number of requests during peak traffic periods. If your backend is unable to handle the requests that you get, you will be losing orders. So you would need to find a way to handle these orders in an asynchronous way, allowing your workers to handle the orders later. Now, even if you would have Lambda functions as integration points for your API gateway, you could still run into issues when Lambda functions are unable to handle the request due to various factors. For example, you could run into an account concurrency limit, and then your Lambda functions would get throttled. Or it could happen that you have such a massive burst of traffic that even if your concurrency quotas are not a problem, you could run into the burst limits for Lambda in a particular region. And you cannot modify this burst limit. So in these cases, you might want to implement the queue-based load leveling pattern. But keep in mind that this will lead to an asynchronous handling of the requests. So your application must be able to handle this asynchronous way of operating. And how this works, so basically you would add a queue as the integration for your API gateway method, and then your workers, which could be Lambdas or other services, can pick up the messages from the queue and process them later. Basically, your queue will act as a buffer in this case. If you work with AWS, then of course SQS, or the simple queue service, is the natural choice for queues, as it is both a highly available and scalable service, and it is actually supported by the API gateway out of the box. And you can see on the screen the diagram with the flow of the data. So user makes request to API gateway puts the request into an SQS queue, and then a Lambda function or something else would pick up the messages and handle them. Now, let's talk about some of the benefits that you would achieve by implementing this pattern. Basically, you would decouple the request handling process from the API gateway, allowing far more flexibility and scalability. You would have improved fault tolerance and availability, as requests can be buffered and processed even if the backend workers are unavailable for some reason. And then, of course, the ability to handle a large number of requests in parallel, which will improve the overall performance of the application. But let's see how can we actually implement this. I'm going to go now to the AWS Management Console and implement this in this video. The first thing we need to do is to create an SQS queue. So we're going to go to the simple queue service. You can search it here in the top box. Just go to it and let's create a queue. So here you can click on create queue here, or you can go to the queues and click on create queue. We are going to stick to the standard queue. I'm going to call this my load leveler queue. Of course, you can invent some better name. And I think that's it here. Of course, you could create a dead letter queue, but right now we're not going to do that. One thing that you're going to need to do is you're going to need to save some things from here because you will need them later. So you have your queue here, and you have here this URL, and you need to copy the part which contains your account number and the name of the queue, and save this for later in some notepad or something somewhere. Then also copy the RN of the queue. This is this one here, and here you have a handy icon to copy the RN. Save this as well, and now we can continue with creating the next things that we are going to need. So let's go to the IAM service, Identity and Access Management, and there we're going to need to create a policy and also a role. So first we're going to go to policies and then click here on create policy, and here we're going to switch to JSON, and I'm going to paste the policy. It's a pretty simple one. You can copy it from the web page. I'm going to link the web page where I published the article, and there you are going to be able to copy this if you need to. So it's allowing the send message action, and here we need to paste the RN of the queue that we copied earlier. So I'm going to just paste it here. This is the RN of my queue, and we're going to click on next again. We need to give it a name. Let's call it as load leveler SQS queue access policy, and then click on create policy. Now we need to create an IAM role, and we need to go here to roles. This role we're going to add to the API gateway, and it will allow the API gateway to send messages to this queue that we've created earlier. So click on create role here, and here you are going to select the trusted entity type as AWS service, and then choose here use cases for other AWS services, and find API gateway here and select it. Click on next again, give it a role name, load leveler queue access role, for example. Click on create role, and now here find it in the list of roles and click on it, and we need to add a permission to it. So click here on add permissions, attach policies, and attach the load leveler SQS queue access policy that you have created earlier. So basically you are attaching that policy to the role, and click on attach policies, and then you are going to need this RN, the RN of the role itself. We're going to need to paste this in API gateway. So let's copy this and save it in a notepad again. I'm going to save it, and let's continue now. The next thing we need to do, we need to go to API gateway and actually create an API. So I opened it in a new tab. Here we're going to want to build a REST API. Make sure it's REST API and not REST API private. So click on build. It offers us to create our first API, but we're going to ignore it. Here select new API, REST and new API. These should be selected. And let's call this, let's suppose this is our web shop, and I'm going to call this products API, for example. Click on create API. And now we're going to need to create some resources. So here, create a resource. And I'm going to call this SQS SQS enqueuer, for example, and then create resource, select it, and click on create method, and this is going to be a post method, and click here on the check mark. And now we have to select the integration type, and here we need to select AWS service. You have to select your region. I'm in US East 1, but this could be something else for you. And then select the service, which should be simple queue service. The HTTP method, in this case it will be post, and you're going to need to use path override. And here you have to paste that path that we've copied when we've created the SQS queue. So it's going to be, in my case, it's going to be this. It's the account number followed by the name of the queue, and between them there is a backslash. And also here you have to paste the RN of the role that we've created at the earlier step. So copy the RN of the role and paste it here. And here we're going to leave everything on default settings and click on save. And then here we're presented with this screen. Click on integration request. Scroll down, and you have here the HTTP headers, which you need to expand. And we're going to need to add the header. And in this case it will be content type, and then here it should be application /x www form URL encoded, and you also should have a single quote at the beginning and at the end. And click on this check mark and save it. So it's giving me an error, and I think I know why the error happens. So here we need to change. I've copied this and I've pasted these quotes, which it doesn't like. So change this to proper single quotes, and it should work. So click on this a few times and it should save it. And now we have the proper content type. We need to expand the mapping templates. Here we're going to add a mapping template, and we're going to have it as the content type as application JSON. Confirm it, and it complains about something. You can click on yes, secure this integration. It will switch here when there are no templates defined. And then here we need to add the proper mapping, and this would be this one. Action equals send message, and message body equals $input.body. You can copy this as well from the accompanying article, which I'm going to link in the description. And then click on save here. And then now we are going to need to deploy our API. So click here on actions and deploy API. Basically, you will create a new stage. Let's have this as the prod stage, the production, and click on deploy. And now we have our API deployed. And now what I'm going to do, I'm going to open Cloud Shell, which is a terminal in the cloud. You can find it here on top. And it will open for us, let's clear this, and it will deploy for us this new terminal where I can run commands. And what I want to do is I want to make a curl request to this API. So I'm going to paste the command, which is going to look like this. So curl location request and the post method. And here you have to replace some of the things that you see here. So the API ID, we're going to take this from here. So this is the API ID on top, or you could go to the APIs and it shows you here the API ID. Okay, let's replace that. The region, you should have the proper region here, US East 1 for me. The stage, which I deployed to the prod stage, and the resource is the SQS enqueuer, which I've created. And then I have a header, it should be content application JSON, and the data, which contains the actual message that will be sent to SQS. And this is the message that should be sent to SQS. Of course, in a normal situation, you would send, for example, the order details, which you are getting from your web shop, and that would be sent to the queue. In this case, I'm just going to send a simple message. And let's click on paste and execute this request. And you see I'm getting back a response from SQS with the request ID, the message attributes, message body hash, and the message ID, and so on. Now let's go to SQS and see if we received this. And you see before I had 0 messages available. Let's refresh. And you see I have 1 message available actually. Let's click on the queue, and here you have this option to send and receive messages. And scroll down, and here you have poll for messages. And you see it shows me here a message. If I click on it, you see a message that I have here. This is the message that should be sent to SQS. It's exactly the message I've sent from here. So I received the message properly. So that's about it. Now you should have a working integration between API Gateway and SQS, and your incoming requests will be sent to SQS, from where you will be able to process them in an asynchronous manner. So this was my video for today. I hope you liked it. If you did, subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and hope to see you soon with another video. Have a great day.